How do you build a culture of technological excellence, including artificial intelligence, without disrupting operations? And what misconceptions should business leaders avoid when adopting these types of technologies?
We obviously today in 2025 are using technology extensively across everything we do. Technology is such a part of everything we do, every day, and it just makes us so much more productive and efficient in the work that we're doing. We're certainly beyond, the conversation of should I do it by paper and calculator. Everything's done on the computer, whether you're using AutoCAD or SolidWorks.
Building a culture of innovation without disrupting operations is one of the biggest challenges engineering leaders face. But how do you stay ahead without losing focus on what's already working? In this episode of the AEC AI and Tech Strategy podcast, I'll be speaking with Nathan Whittacre, founder and CEO of Stimulus Technologies and author of the book, The CEO's Digital Survival Guide, a practical handbook to navigating the future, to talk about how civil engineering CEOs can drive technological excellence while managing risk. Nathan will be sharing practical insights on today's top cybersecurity threats, debunking common AI myths, and making smart decisions about emerging technologies. Whether you're scaling a growing firm and navigating digital transformation, this conversation will give you a roadmap to lead smarter, safer, and more future-ready teams. But before we jump in, I wanted to tell you about our AEC PM Connect event, built for project managers who want to improve project delivery, communication, and leadership through practical sessions and tools. These events provide an avenue to connecting with leading PMs in the industry. Visit aecpmconnect.com and register today. We currently have events in Kansas City and New Jersey, with more coming, and I hope to see you there in person. With that, let's jump into today's episode. It's now time for our conversation of the week with Nathan Whittacre. Nathan, thank you so much for taking the time to join the show today, and welcome.
It's great to be here. Thanks, Nick, for inviting me.
Absolutely. So I know, Nathan, you're bringing a bit of a different perspective, I think, than many of our guests. So I'm excited to get to talk to you. So why don't we just get it kicked right off? Can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself, your company, and what you do on a daily basis?
Sure. So Nathan Whittacre, I'm the CEO and founder of Stimulus Technologies. We are a managed IT service technology firm based in Las Vegas, Nevada. This month where we're recording, we're celebrating 30 years in business. Been in the technology industry for a long time, and it's certainly evolved over those 30 years. Day to day, since the company has grown, I'm more leading teams and setting the strategic vision of the company. But what we do as a business is we help our clients succeed in their businesses through technology. So we offer a variety of services, everything from network infrastructure, help desk support, cybersecurity, compliance, internet, and voice over IP services. So full suite of products, and our focus is on small to mid-sized companies. So think 5 to 50 employees in that range.
Excellent. So managed IT, you've got a number of different clients. I understand some of which are engineering firms, right?
Right. Yeah, it's been one of our niches is engineering, architecture. There's certainly a high demand for technology and engineering, and high need for good quality IT services. So we've had a lot of firms over the years as clients.
And I think and even in the discussion we had before we got kicked off here, and in my own personal experience, so a lot of what the success of the services you guys implement and the firms receiving them is culture, right? Because if you're a firm that's just, let's just say, a culture of maybe not being as accepting of technology, I think you're going to see a different sort of result. So how do you build a culture of technological excellence, including artificial intelligence, without disrupting operations? And what misconceptions should business leaders avoid when adopting these types of technologies?
I think, we obviously today in 2025 are using technology extensively across everything we do in life and in business. I often think of the example, I think it was the Apollo 13 movie, and showed, these engineers designing these rocket ships to go into space. And there's, hundreds of engineers sitting in rooms, drafting and calculating on site rules and, hand drawings. And I mean, we don't do that anymore. So, technology is such a part of everything we do, every day, and it just makes us so much more productive and efficient in the work that we're doing. We're certainly beyond, the conversation of should I do it by paper and calculator. Everything's done on the computer, whether, you're using AutoCAD or SolidWorks or, tool, something like that. But the question is how do you effectively use that across the organization and then implement new technologies like AI as they come along? And so, just an experience that I've seen over the years with clients, one thing that I see that often goes wrong is, you go to a conference, you talk to a friend, you hear about a new tool and you throw it into your workflow thinking that it's going to solve so many problems. And without, a really good concept of, what are you going to solve or what are your problems you're having? And then what solutions are you going to come up with solve those problems? You just implement a lot of tools that don't lead to, productivity. So what we try to do is, work with our clients on analyzing, what issues they're having in their workflows, what's going well in their business, what could they use improvements on, and then go out and find solutions that solve those kind of problems. So AI, I think, is the one that, a lot of people are talking about today. And you asked me about that is, people want to throw AI at the problem and say, well, if we, use ChatGPT to do all X, it'll make things more efficient. And they find that, the solution isn't quite what they were expecting, or it's doing it wrong, or, ends up taking more time just to work with it. But then there's other things that, these AI tools can be really good at and be an augmentation to the work that we're doing. So I think it's just trying to find where the problems are, where the slowdowns of productivity, and then give the tools to your team that will help solve those. So it's, starting with the problem rather than starting with the solution.
Strong leadership drives strong projects. Become an AEC PM professional and give your team the leadership skills they need to thrive. Customized PM development, premium content, and a leadership edge that sets you apart. Learn more at aecpm.com.
Love it, Nathan. And I've come across exactly this so many times in my career, and I feel like I'll just name a few, right? So like problems worth solving and a problem in search of a solution, not the other way around. And one of my recent favorites, digital decoration, where you're throwing AI technology, right? It's like digital lipstick on a pig, right? You're just trying to do something without understanding the underlying cause, which then it sounds like in a lot of your clients, right, is understanding their business process. And like you said, what's going well, what's not working, and then finding a solution there instead of the other way around.
And I think certainly from, team members, I think there's a lot of concern in all industries of AI replacing the work that we're doing. And I think if we look at the perspective of AI can enhance what we're doing, it can really solve the problems. It's not going to just do the work for us. It's going to enhance the creative work and the logical work that we do well as humans, and then make the things that we, that are time consuming or mundane a little bit easier. I'll just use an example. For me, my background is in computer science, computer programming, but I don't do that every day anymore. I rarely write code, but every once in a while, I have a problem that I want to solve. Even as, the leader of my company, I'm like, well, I'll just do this little project on the side. And because I don't have, day-to-day work in software development or coding, I can use a tool like ChatGPT or one of the other large language models to assist me in writing the code. So the thing that maybe I don't remember the syntax and everything that I need to do to write the code anymore right off the top of my head, I'd have to research it. That's a game changer for me to not have to remember all of that, but give the parameters of what I'm trying to develop. And then, that it's an augmentation to the thought process I'm already having. So I think if we look at AI and some of these new tools as augmentation, I think it's a lot better. And then it'll solve the problems we're looking for today.
Excellent. And keep it on the train of tools, Nathan. So what digital habits, tools, or systems help you stay ahead in the technology space? How can CEOs and other high-level leaders adopt similar practices effectively in their own routines?
So I think we have to stay on top of what's happening, understanding where changes are. So some habits that I take is, I stay abreast of, latest technology trends in my industry. I would certainly recommend, that in any industry. I still go to conferences. I'm actually heading out next week to an IT conference. I like, looking to see what new vendors are out there and what tools that they have. So that's, kind of a habit that I have, is just staying on top of what's happening in my industry and And I think, for all of us, especially in technical fields, seeing what new players are out there, what new technologies are coming on board, it might not be something that you invest, time and money in today, but it might be something to look at down the road. So that's a habit I have. For me too, in the technology space, I step away from technology periodically too. So, taking time as a leader of my organization to step back from the day-to-day work and, give some time to think about really our overall strategy as a company. For me, that's, I'm a endurance athlete. I take time away to, run and bike, and I also love backpacking out on the mountains. So getting away completely from technology for a period of time helps, really de-stress my life, not distress, de-stress my life. And so I can focus on the work, the good work that I'm doing. So, those are some habits that I've formed over the years that have helped me, be a better leader in my organization and focus on when I'm in the business, working on it, that I can really focus and take the time that I need to.
Excellent. And I think that's great because you're so close to technology and the services that you provide your clients. So it's actually really refreshing to hear that you're able to take that sort of break from it and have it help you out, right? Because I know when I do the same, right, I feel a lot better about the situations, and then obviously have a whole different perspective compared to just burning the candle at both ends, right?
Right. 100% agree.
And keeping on the topic of let's say problems, let's talk cybersecurity. So just from an outsider's perspective, right? Like I think this has always been something that's been in the news, but more recently to a different level. So from your perspective, what are the most pressing cybersecurity threats facing engineering firms today? And how can leaders address them without becoming overwhelmed?
So if I like looking at the FBI statistics overall from cybersecurity trends, and we've seen a big shift away from direct ransomware attacks, which we were talking about, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, is ransomware being the biggest problem for all companies. And we actually consulted for an engineering firm that was hit by a ransomware attack, and they thought that they had everything, working really well. But the ransomware attack took down their entire organization and caused them, a lot of problems for a couple of weeks. So that, a few years ago, that was all we talked about. And today I think the things have changed a little bit because we've gotten a little much better about certain aspects of cybersecurity and cyber hygiene. The implementation of multi-factor authentication as a secondary, mechanism, the codes you have to put in to log in has been one of the biggest security changes that we've implemented and prevented so many attacks. But what we're finding still is business email compromise, even with all the protections of, antivirus and anti-spam and AI protection, is still very prevalent. And most of the attack vectors that are coming into organizations today are coming in through business email compromise. So it's still that link that you get or the attachment that you get that looks legitimate. You click on it and it was not. So we're seeing some interesting things, some trends recently. One of them is calendar invite attacks, like Zoom invite attacks. So you get what appears to be from maybe a vendor or a customer or, colleague inviting you to some type of Zoom or Teams meeting, and you accept it. You click on the link at the time of the meeting, and it ends up downloading some type of system takeover software like Screen Connect or TeamViewer or something like that, and gets installed on your computer. So it looks like a legitimate, link and invite, but it ends up being illegitimate software. So it's one of the new ones that we're seeing that's kind of interesting. And then I mentioned multi-factor authentication. There are some recent new attacks that are going after the multi-factor authentication tokens. And without getting too, complicated into the weeds of it, these hackers are working towards getting that relationship between your authenticator tool and the authentication system, and so they can override your multi-factor authentication. So that's kind of the scary one. FBI just put out some notice on that, and making sure that we're protecting and securing our environments better, and then not allowing third-party authorization into your multi-factor authentication protected system. So give you an example of what that looks like is, we're often wanting to do single sign-on, for example. So you have a third-party application that uses Microsoft 365 to do a single sign-on. So rather than having to have, a separate login for this tool, you use Microsoft 365 or your Google login or something like that to log into this third-party system. Now that's developed a token and a method potentially for hackers to get in to your Microsoft 365 environment through a backdoor. And so that's been the latest FBI warning, is protecting environments that are protected multi-factor authentication, and the stealing of the tokens and the relationships is a big problem. So how do you protect yourself? I would recommend every system has a separate login and password as much as possible. You secure those with a password manager, and I highly recommend multi-factor authentication on everything, but just make sure that you're not giving those codes out and that you're not letting third parties access into those systems that have multi-factor authentication. The other thing that I recommend that we do extensively is identity protection on your cloud-based system. So we have tools that monitor, especially your Microsoft 365 or Google environment, that look for account takeover. So what a hacker will do is, if they are able to get access to your 365 environment, they're going to take over your accounts and monitor them for a while. And you need third-party tools to monitor for that type of hacking attempt, and then we can stop it. So, we just implemented a new tool recently, and we found, actually a few dozen potential infections. It's less than 1% of, our network, but it was pretty extensive, where these hackers had gotten in one way and were just monitoring systems looking for potential vectors to attack their environment. So just having the, third party monitor those in the event that, gets past all the security mechanisms and still get in, that you can, prevent an attack. So those are the biggest ones that we're seeing today.
Yeah, and it sounds like it is a lot to manage and take hold of, particularly if you, right, as a business leader, you get the idea of why cybersecurity is needed, but you may not understand the specifics and the nuance and the attack vectors. Right. So I guess that's right. That's the benefit of working with someone like you.
Yeah, I think the challenge today is, just like anything, if I was a, building owner, or, somebody that wanted to construct a building, I'm certainly not going to go out and try to design it myself. You have to hire a team, that can effectively do it. And I think it's the same way with technology. We find a lot with engineering firms that, engineers are really good with technology. And it's one of the reasons why we like working with them, is because, we speak the same language often from a technology perspective. But it's really important that you have, specialists that are looking at this, that, are up to date on the latest trends, and, working with and managing the right tools, because the environment's really tough out there, and it's just getting, it ebbs and flows. I would say, with the latest tools that are out there, we're getting a little bit ahead of it. But, these hackers are looking always for ways to get around, the latest systems and tools that are out there. And, really it's humans that make the mistakes. And, in the end, they're just social engineering us to figure out a way for us to click on that link and, download that piece of software, or, share that, code or token in a way that they can use it against us, and just have to build more walls to prevent that from happening.
Absolutely. And, moving on, right, keeping on the topic of executives. So what are some of the biggest challenges leaders face in today's digital landscape? And how should civil engineering executives evaluate which technologies are actually worth investing in, right? Because as we discussed earlier, there's chasing shiny objects, applying tools maybe where they don't belong. But then how are these leaders supposed to know the difference, and then what's actually worth investing in?
Well, I think, I've thrown out different scenarios. I think leaders get overwhelmed, especially when we talk about cybersecurity. I think that overwhelms a lot of leaders. And so you feel like, okay, I just want to focus on doing what I'm really good at. I want to focus on engineering. I want to focus on design. I don't want to focus on all these other things. And so, it's a lot to deal with because, if you're a leader of an organization, you're dealing with payroll, you're dealing with customers, you're dealing with sales and marketing, you're dealing with your own team and HR. It becomes overwhelming to add another thing to your list of what you need to know and be good at it. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges of a leader of any organization faces, is just that overwhelm of, what's the most important thing I need to be focused on. And, in the end, you want to be focused on delivering great service to your clients. You want to be focused on, your trade as a company and be successful in that. So I think, hiring and working with really talented people and organizations that can help take that burden off of you so you don't have to be thinking about it, except, potentially a periodic review with that organization. But, you feel like you have peace of mind working with a good group. And so I think, from a technology perspective, is identifying, what problems, what issues you're having as an organization. Say, how can we be more productive? How can we do better work? And then going to your vendors, your solution providers, and asking them to say, okay, this is the business problem I'm having. How can you help me solve that business problem? Rather than, trying to figure it out yourself, or, the salesperson that comes to you and says, I have the shiny new object, buy it from me. And I think that's the wrong approach. If they do that, they say, well, how does that help me solve these business problems? And, take it from perspective of, looking to the future, looking to where you're trying to go as an organization, and look for ways of accomplishing that through the solutions you're having or you can find out there.
Really well said. And Nathan, here's a personal question, right? So you've discussed how, right? So you're the CEO of a company you've been running for some time now. You're an athlete. You're doing a number of things. So how do you balance the demands of running your business with your own personal or long-term goals as a CEO?
Blocking time. I have a very blocked schedule. I take, for me, the morning time and the evening, late afternoon, evening, are my time for training for my races and things that I'm doing, and making that a priority, because I have to show up well for work, and I have to be fully engaged in the work that I'm doing, and so my mental and physical health is essential for that, and so it's ensuring that I have the time for it. And then, have a vision of what in my personal life. So I actually, every beginning of every year, I take a bit of time to reflect on the previous year, where I went. And then I set out goals for the following year. And these are personal goals. And I break them up into, physical, spiritual, educational, business, financial. And then once a month, I do a one-to-one with myself. I take an hour or two and reflect on those goals, where am I at, and set monthly, goals that will lead me to achieve those. So that I learned that, I don't know, 17 years ago at a conference. And it's something that, one of the speakers said that personal one-to-one was my most important meeting for the month. And when he said that, I'm like, well, I'm not doing that right now. Let me try it out. And it has been and still is my most important meeting in the month, is just taking that time away to set the vision for, my life, and also for the business and the direction it's going. So that's, just making sure that I'm taking time for myself, taking time to think about, the future, where I'm headed, in the next 1 month, 1 year, 3 years, 10 years, and making sure that I'm doing something towards that every day if I can.
Excellent. And Nathan, thank you again so much for taking the time to join us today. What final piece of advice can you give to AEC leaders and innovators who want to lead smarter, more secure, future-ready firms?
I think, if you look at that diffusion of innovation, that graph, there's people that are really early adopters and the people that are laggards. And I think for leaders of organizations, especially if you're a little bit more mature of an organization, you want to be on the left side of the curve. You want to be looking for technologies that are going to help you succeed in your business. Maybe they're newer technologies. I wouldn't say being, as an innovator, early adopter, that's a challenge of its own, but making sure that you're staying ahead of your competition and being successful with the latest technologies and always looking for ways to improve the organization through technology. So if you have one of the things we do inside our organization is we review all our vendors, all the tools that we have, and making sure that they're serving us well. And if there's any new ones or new technologies that have come up that have matured enough that we want to implement, and we're constantly, implementing new technologies and systems in our company, and then designing, procedures and systems around those to ensure that they're successfully integrated in what we're doing. So I, suggest that to anybody is making sure that you're ahead of, the curve and, always innovating your organization. And that's what leads to success.
Excellent. And again, Nathan, thank you so much for taking the time today. If the audience has any more questions for you, wants to discuss anything that we've discussed today in further detail, what's the best way for them to reach you?
You can contact me on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn, search my name, Nathan Whittacre, or you can find me on our website, company website, stimulustech.com, and be happy to have a further conversation with you.
Excellent. Nathan, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you again so much for taking the time.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Till next time, please remember, you can find the show notes for this episode at aectechpodcast.com. There, you will find a summary of key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during this episode. Until next time, I wish you the best in all of your engineering and technology endeavors. Thank you.